Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Daughters of Hadassah. My name is Gail. Today, let's talk about the Queen. All hail the Queen. I'm talking about Queen Esther. As we look at Esther and we look at her life and we look at, we're not going to look into all of that. We're just going to look at where Esther is as Queen. I already did a video talking about Hadassah into becoming Queen Esther. Now we're going to talk about Queen Esther as Queen. I love the story of Queen Esther. Sister Girl played her part unto checkmate. Her enemies came up against her and her people, and God had her in position for such a time as this. So, sisters, as we look at our lives and the calling on our lives, who's to say that God does not have us in position for such a time as this? So as we have this little real talk, look at Esther and reflect on our Christian walks, our voices, the power that we have, we are going to look at Esther and examine ourselves. Now, as I already mentioned, Esther was named Hadassah. She was an orphan. She progressed in winning a beauty pageant and became Queen Esther. In her becoming Queen Esther, she got into the palace, got into place, and Mordecai had to come back and remind Queen Esther of who she was. Because Haman, Mordecai's mortal enemy, decided that he was going to kill all the Jews because he could not stand Mordecai. Now, he was a racist who wanted to destroy God's people. And he used Mordecai and his disobedience, his refusal to bow down and worship him, as an excuse to exterminate the Jews. But God had Esther, a book that does not talk about God, does not mention God, does not mention prayer, but has a strong, powerful presence of God in this book. His hand was on Esther from the very beginning, from the time she was Hadassah, into the pageant, into her winning the pageant. Everything was orchestrated and ordained by God. But Esther, as she got into place, got comfortable into being queen, and Mordecai had to go back to her and remind her that, sweetie, you are a Jew too. If we perish, you going down with us, because they will find out that you are a Jew. So Esther rises up, calls for a fast, and the people fast while Miss Esther, Queen Esther, plays her part in the palace. Now, mind you, in the beginning of the book of Esther, it was because of a banquet that was held that Vashti refused to come to the king and see what the king wanted and needed, and she was kicked out of the palace. She was exiled from being queen, and Esther, Hadassah, steps in because of that banquet that was held. Now, the king was furious because Vashti refused to come to him at a banquet. She pleased the king at a banquet, embarrassed him at a banquet. So what does the wise, beautiful queen who's set in place for such a time as this do? She throws a banquet. She throws the king a banquet, invites all his boys, set the banquet up with all the finest foods and drinks that the king could suck up, because some scholars believe that the king Ahasuerus was a drunk. So Queen Esther provided everything that he needed to please him at the banquet. Queen Esther did not reveal to the king what was going on, what she heard, what she knew. She did not complain. At the first banquet, she allowed him to enjoy himself. And when he asked her, what did she want? She didn't go to the king and say, oh, king, we need you to do this. No. That sister girl used wisdom. She threw him another banquet. Successful banquet. All the boys, all the food, all the booze, everything that he wanted to please him. He was displeased with the banquet where Vashti disrespected him, but he became well pleased at the banquet that the beautiful, all hail Queen Esther threw him back to back. So when at the banquet, Haman is at this banquet, and the king asks Queen Esther, baby, what is it that you want? I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. And Queen Esther starts to tell her husband the plan of Mr. Haman. And Haman begins to lose his mind in the sense of he knew, but he did not know that Queen Esther was a Jew. He knew who she was talking about when she revealed to the king that there was somebody trying to exterminate her people. And he had a plan and tricked the king and told the king that he wanted a decree to be made so that the king would be honored, and fooled the king into signing the decree. And Queen Esther revealed to the king, it's Haman. And the king was furious. He had to go take a walk to think about this thing. God's hands were so strong on this story that it was during that time a man could not be in the presence of the queen, because the way that they had dinner, the way that they feast, they didn't sit in chairs at a table. They laid across like a couch, and each person had their own couch at a banquet to lay across. So Haman, begging for his life, goes over into Queen Esther's territory and invades her space. And the king walks in and finds him laying all over Queen Esther, begging for his life. The king was furious. So you know what he did? He hung Haman in his own trap. But I give props to Queen Esther because she played her part with wisdom. She was in the kingdom for such a time as this. She was in place when her enemies rose up against her. She was in place to save her people. Now, when it comes to us, gifts and talents, the call of God that is upon our lives, are we in place? Are we using wisdom, or are we just foolish saints of God running off at the mouth, saying things that don't make sense, not being strategic and using the power that we have to conquer the enemy, not using wisdom, not using the skills and the things that have been done in the past and taking that and flipping it and turning it into the positive and getting the victory by trusting God, allowing him to lead us and guide us, to give us the wisdom to say the things that we ought to say, to pray the things that we ought to pray, to do the things that we ought to do. Or are we in the flesh, like Vashti, deciding to be disobedient and to do things our way, when there is a greater way, a better way to do it? Haman formed the weapon against the children of Israel, but it couldn't prosper because Esther was in place for such a time as this. Let us use wisdom. Use our voice. Pray. Talk to God. He has us in place for such a time as this. And it doesn't matter what's going on. We have to trust God in all things and in everything, because we are in place for such a time as this, to use our voices, to use our gifts, to use our power, to use the presence of God. For greater is he that is in us than he who is in the world. We have to pull down strongholds, cast down imaginations, but we use wisdom, the wisdom of the word of God, applying the word of God, binding and loosing, declaring and decreeing, and doing whatever is necessary to stand ground, and knowing that the battle is not always ours to fight. Queen Esther was not caught up in how she was going to win this battle, how she was going to do it in the flesh. Though God is not mentioned in the Bible, God's hand, he's visible all in, not in the Bible, in the book of Esther. He's visible all in the book of Esther. Esther wasn't worried about anything. She had a strategic plan, and the plan worked. And she got the victory. And the ditch that was dug for Mordecai and his people, Haman ended up falling into that ditch, because the battles that is not ours belongs to the Lord. That's my take on Queen Esther. Let us examine ourselves. Look at Queen Esther and see if we are not called into the kingdom to let our light shine for such a time as this. This is Daughters of Hadassah. My name is Gail. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel. Have a blessed and prosperous day.